Your neighbors must love you.
Yeah, not so much.
Welcome back to the Garage YouTube fam. You got me, you got D, Wackety Racing Channel, coming back at you again with another episode. So, where we last left off on this guy, we had some wiring and a bunch of stuff, but we didn't get a lot done. Well, we got a lot done, we didn't get a lot finished. So, I got to button up wiring on this, we got to finish the fuel tank and put our new fuel cap in, and basically just start buttoning up all of the details on this thing that were about 80-85%, get them up to about 100%. That way we could really start pushing forward with install and getting this thing finished so we can get it running to the dyno and hear choo-choo noises and everything else. So that's number one. Number two, D. Over here with the 472, we got some break-in fluids. Last week we were able to get the exhaust all run so we can basically go way out there with the noise and we can actually listen to the motor, radiator mounted. What's the plan?
So if you're new to the channel, this is a Cadillac 472. It's got some hot rod parts in it. This is a torque monster. It's going to be going in our tow rig that we're going to be using as our chase vehicle / delivery vehicle for doing track days. That's Project Hidalgo, and I'll put the link for that right here. That being said, we've been building this motor for a little while, putting it together, and there's a whole lot more to it. We don't have time to explain right now. So I got to try and button up some of this last minute stuff, like running wiring, adding some fluids, making sure nothing leaks, priming the motor. All that stuff needs to happen so that I can hopefully get this thing fired up when my family gets into town for an unrelated purpose. But they helped me out a lot with this thing and setting the valve trainer and everything, and I want them to be here for it. So hopefully you guys will see that video next week. But I got to do all that stuff as far as making a battery tray and running all those wires. So that's going to be kind of what I'm focusing on while Cody keeps working on the car. I'll be tagging in to help him anytime that needs my help. Additionally, something else that's been really bothering me that we got to try and get focused on. I don't like the lighting and the way that it's captured on video because I feel like you guys deserve better quality content, and sometimes the cars driving by makes it even worse. So we do have new lighting coming in for the entire garage, hopefully on Wednesday, and sound deadening strips that we're going to be laying out in several places throughout the garage to try and up the quality of our content for you guys. So if you guys appreciate the additional efforts to try and give you better quality content and trying to keep up with several projects at once and the difficulty of all that and having to edit it, please consider liking and subscribing so that we can continue to push forward and give you guys good quality content. But for now, we got a lot to do. Let's get started.
Alright kids, so this is where this is going to start for the Opel. So this is the previous loom that we ran under the bottom side of the car. Has the fuse, one of the main fuse boxes for the Miata here. But the only run that actually goes into the engine bay is this little tiny one. And this is all the alternator wiring. So my thought on this is rather than running it down and under and up into the engine bay, I actually was able to tuck the loom that was supposed to be on the passenger side onto the driver's side around. It'll get tight around the seat, go tight to the trans tunnel, and then come up tight into the dash. So that leaves this guy that we previously ran under the car that does all the fuel tank and the back end stuff along with the battery. I might just do the same thing. I have a factory hole here and I already made a hole there. Probably going to run it through along trans tunnel. And then fun fact, if you take a sledgehammer to the big plastic box in here that we're no longer using anyways because it's a heater and race cars don't need heaters.
California don't need heaters.
You got a lot of room. So the plan is basically to shove everything up into the heater box, the old heater box, all of this mess and whatever doesn't need to go into the engine bay. And the fuse box will fit perfectly up in there too, be nice and hidden, but still be accessible, and we can just punch through the wires that we need to. Other than that, we've already got, like I showed you before, we've got the center loom, which is a lot of the main controls and sensors for the motor, coming out right there. And then all the driver side stuff with the diagnostic box, we're able to actually use the old kind of air intake section on top. We'll still get airflow, but we don't really care about much else. So we're almost there.
Quick address. Now, I recognize that somebody that's paying keen attention is going to go, where in the world is your windshield wiper motor and armatures? And the short answer is we live in California. It rains like 1 week a year. We just won't drive this non-daily driver on those days. Or we'll just coat all the glass in Rain-X before we go hit the track. It's not that big a deal. I feel like sometimes you guys stress too much. Hey, could it turn on the windshield wipers?
Yeah, got it.
Safe.
All right, show you what we got going on. So we were able to get that whole loom pulled out of that hole that we had previously made, and now it's all sitting in the car. So you can maybe see fuel tanks hooked back up. We got battery lugs back where they go. The main plug is in the same position, and snaking it back outside of the car comes to our fuse box, and then all of our alternator wiring and stuff that's on this half of the loom. The main concern on this guy is this little ground right here. It's technically like a headlight ground, but it also grounds out the motor. So if this thing is not grounded correctly, your motor won't start, won't run, won't anything. And then this guy right here, these two plugs are the back of the the fuse box here. There's a couple plugs in there. So in theory, as it sits, the ECU is just dangling now. I'm going to tuck that in and get it secured, and then all this stuff, basically going to stretch it out along the trans tunnel, go straight along the trans tunnel, come up, and then over to the heater box, which is on this side, shove all that stuff into the heater box, and then pop one little small hole through the firewall. Because if you guys remember, there was not a very long run to come out of the heater box here down to the alternator, which sits right about here. So don't need a whole lot sticking out. I'm going to try to see if that's all I can push out and keep everything else tucked up tight inside the heater box, but we'll see. So let's check on D, see what we got going on over here. So give me a quick rundown on your setup first, and then we'll talk about the math.
So over here we have this little fuel cell that I've made and bolted to the run stand. I don't know what it holds, probably something to the effect of 3/4 gallon, maybe a gallon. I've got it running this cute little Edelbrock pump. It's like a 7-8 PSI pump, which should be sufficient for this. And we're gonna go ahead and bench test our carburetor and check for leaks. Realistically, you're looking at 2 leaks that are gonna be a concern. Leak 1 is external, where if you fill the float bowls and one of the floats is stuck in the down position, it'll overflow out of the sides and dump gasoline all over the side and ruin all the paintwork you've done on your intake manifold and whatever else is around. We don't want that. It's a pain in the neck. Worst case scenario, you end up with an internal leak, hypothetically if say a power valve is out of place. You'll end up with gasoline running to the inside, and you can result in a hydrolock where as the cylinder comes around to try and hit its combustion stroke, it'll basically be trying to compress a fluid, which is not possible, and it'll have to find somewhere to go. You can bend valves, you can destroy pistons, you can bend push rods. There's a lot of things that can happen with that you want to try and avoid. So we're just going to turn on the pump, make sure that everything fills up the way it's supposed to, and if everything's good and honky-dory, we'll go ahead and slap it on the engine. Oh.
There you go, we got a little leak
from the rear as well. So it's possible the floats are stuck. So we're gonna just tap on it with a screwdriver, otherwise we can go ahead and take them loose and put them back. However, this is also how you adjust to the float. So we're gonna be kind of mindful of that as we go, because we don't wanna necessarily lose our float adjustment. I have every reason to believe that this carburetor was on a good running motor prior to what we're doing with it now. However, that would have been probably 5 years ago. So I don't want to necessarily lose our adjustment.
And you made one worse, made one better.
Yeah, so this one's clearly either got no gasket or it's just not tight. We haven't tried tightening it. So we'll start with that. Just go ahead and pull it out and see what we got. Seal looks good, but it's hard as a rock. So that's probably our problem. Alright, so you can hear our pump whirling away. We don't have any more leaks. We got that sorted. We went through some new gaskets in here at the float level adjustment. So this is a vacuum secondary. There's nothing we can do with that. We're not going to see that open or shoot until you actually see vacuum underneath the base of the carburetor. However, with our primaries, you can see that spraying just fine. So I think we're gonna go ahead and move forward. I'm gonna go ahead and set it on there and get it all mounted up.
All right, guys, so where we're sitting here, use the existing hole where the heater hoses ran through for all the alternator wiring, plus the ground and everything we'll need out here. All those wires are now tucked up into the heater box. Yeah, they're ugly for now, but they'll get cleaned up and everything. We'll end up pulling it out probably one or two more times throughout the whole process of firing everything up. That is all going to be pushed back and cleaned up a little bit with a plate to block all that off of the dash. And the driver's side's pretty much tucked in place too. So as far as wiring goes, everything's pretty well ran to its final destination. We just got to make sure everything gets plugged in and hooked up. We're not missing anything before we try to fire this thing up.
We filled the radiator with water, and minus a couple small drips from things that I forgot to plug up. No real drips. I got the wires run for the radiator fan temporarily, and that's right. I committed the ultimate sin. I used wire nuts. And you know what you're going to do about it? Nothing. That's right. We're going to run it anyways. So, these things are friggin' dope. Check this out. Cody's about to knock this big old hole saw through his fender so we can make a filler hole that aligns more correctly with the gas tank. This is a critical moment because it takes big old, I'm going to modify my car balls.
Yep. She's home.
Somebody that needed that particular quarter panel or just spent 100 hours patching theirs is just crying, you know that, right?
Yeah.
How's it make it feel?
I don't care.
Okay, good.
Because that is where that's going to go right there.
Oh, look at that. Something nice and smooth, and then just like so. And then boom. Fuel down the neck. This is easily painted to match the bodywork. And then send it home. That's nice and smooth, and it will not obstruct the eye. So that'll solve our problem quickly and easily.
Yep.
So this right here is the epitome of hot rodding tools. Oftentimes you can purchase one of these for your standard motors like Chevy motors and Ford motors and so on and so forth. This one was easy for me to make because I already had one. But we use the center shaft out of an old distributor, which has the drive gear for the oil pump on the end, which means you can place it down in the motor and prime the oil pump so that it picks up oil from the pan and starts pumping it through the entire system without the engine running. If you've ever fired up a motor that's a fresh build or from a long sit or anything like that, this is a critical phase, particularly in our instance where we're going to be breaking in a new cam. Now, we're not firing it up tonight, but I have the ability to pump oil through all the galleys and several of the gaskets that have been replaced, as well as my oil gauge, and see what leaks, if anything. We won't know until we actually fire it up. This is a nice way, though, that we can preemptively start checking for those things so that if it leaks with this much, which is only the RPM of the drill, it's definitely going to leak with the motor. So we're hoping for no leaks. Now, all right, so we got something in the system. Let's check for leaks before we make a huge mess if anything does leak. And if that's not leaking, we'll really zip her up and see what we can get.
It was an eventful night. We got a lot done, kind of splitting time between the two of them. I got a lot of parts made up for this, for the fuel tank, and some of those, I still got to get some hardware, some rubber washers, and a couple pins, and some nuts and washers. And so Ace Hardware trip is in the near future for probably sometime during the week. Mr. Man over here got that thing primed.
We got a lot further than I thought we were going to. I was expecting every fluid on the floor.
Yeah, and really all we had was an overfilled gas tank and a stopper in the radiator, a drain stopper that
for a heater hose that evidently works.
Yeah, so progress, a lot of progress. So
feeling pretty freaking good.
President's Day, Dakota's working. I'm here in the garage by myself, just kind of doing some things, button things up like I said I was going to. So check it out. Here's what we got. Went to the hardware store, picked up some little clamps. I'll show you where we have those actually inside the car, and then picked up these bonded washers. So it's rubber on the back side, metal on the other, and they're bonded together. And then was able to actually, you can see one, slide that down on top. Got the holes already drilled into our actual verticals, and we got a pin just like that. That's actually gonna hold everything down and in place, hold it nice and tight, so we won't have any movement there. Like I said, just gonna start getting some of these wires kind of tightened and buttoned into place so we can actually have those things finalized. That's the Skinny, keep working. The other thing I forgot to mention, we got the gas cap actually installed into the factory sheet steel. The hole was just a little bit too big, and what I actually needed was about a 2 1/4, give or take, and I found they didn't have a 2 1/4, so I found a 2 1/8 inch hole saw one, a little bit smaller. Got a sheet of, I think it's 042 sheet aluminum we had left over, and augered a hole out of that, and then used the handy dandy deburr to slowly kind of start pulling metal off of that inner circle until it was super tight to shove that thing through. Sandwiched that actually in place and used an all-purpose, like basically a 5-minute epoxy to sandwich that whole piece together. It's nice and secure, nice and tight. I got it sprayed yellow just for the time being. I do want it to hide, but I kind of want to be able to show it off a little bit too. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe black, maybe yellow.
Tuesday night, I'm going to go ahead and start running cables and a battery tray for the Cadillac motor. Watching me run cables is going to be about as exciting as watching paint dry, so I'm just going to go ahead and update you guys when I get somewhere. So it's been roughly 3 hours since I caught up with you guys, and kind of we'll break down kind of what everything is. One of those things is I have this enormous alternator on here. If it puts out the power that allegedly it does, based on what I bought it for, that's a 250 amp alternator for bass racing or stereo contests. The reason I wanted so much is because I'm running these enormous fans. I'm gonna have a winch on the truck, a bunch of lighting, big stereo, a bunch of other accessories, and I didn't want to have to worry about that. Running that much power, if it does, and it doesn't actually regulate the way it's supposed to. So down here we have a resettable breaker set for 250 amp. So if it does happen to get out of hand, we can just set the breaker and it won't be putting juice back to everything. Fans are just kind of wired in. I've got them just stuck there for now, and then we're going to stick them straight to the battery once we actually get fluids moving. Come off of the alternator, it goes back down and meets up with the starter back over to the battery, and then everything else is kind of just strung up to our panel. Starter button, on-off switch, and then a small fuse panel. So everything gets hairy, it'll blow a fuse before we have a real problem. We have our tiny little fuel cell that I built. It runs down on a little tiny Edelbrock fuel pump. Stole the Optima out of the truck and used the old battery tray from the Opel. We're gonna try and get some of this dust off of it so we don't have to smell it while it burns in. Don't want another weird smell while we're trying to look for anything that's strange. Yeah, it's been sitting a while. We're doing things and stuff today. It's Wednesday. We have like an entire list of things to do. We made a bunch of massive headway on the motor. This is my stepdad Drake. He helped me set up the original whole thing that started this whole run stand thing off. We set the valve train on this, which is a shim style valve train instead of an adjustable one. It takes a lot more time and energy. So he helped me set it up, and I felt it was only fair that because of all that work and effort that we spent on it together, I waited until he was out here to fire it up. We're also waiting until Friday to fire up so his dad can be out here and check it out, because he also spent a lot of time working on the motor with us. So we're gonna be waiting until Friday to fire it up. I don't know if that's gonna be on this video or the next one. We'll find out later. But that's good for now. It can wait and we can fire it up. I mean, we can basically start it right now as soon as it's primed. As for this thing, we have a whole lot of stuff to do. I think where we're gonna start with the fuel system. Basically, the last thing that we need to do is run one hose to the fuel neck so we can actually put gas in it. And then we're gonna start looking at some of the final things for the wiring. It's pretty freaking close. Cody's been working really hard on it. And then we gotta start looking at pedals. Shout out to Taz. Taz also has an Opel GT with an NB motor swap. So he's been working on his for a little while as well, and he gave us a really good insight that we're gonna wanna work on putting in the master cylinder for the clutch before we try and swing the motor back in, because it's gonna take up some of that real estate that we need, and we don't wanna be trying to do that at the same time. So I think I'm gonna take a look at that today. Another thing, so you might notice that we have this sound deadening in the garage on the garage door so that we can actually kill some of the sound outside, which is coming in handy today. And we have all new shop lighting so that we can have much more even lighting throughout the shop so you guys can see what we're doing without blowing out a bunch of our shots. So
let's do it.
Let's get started. Well guys, we managed to get sidetracked last night and we never updated at the end of the night, but basically what we got around to was we started mocking up where the clutch master cylinder was going to go and how we're going to hook that up to the original Opel pedal. We did get the filler neck set up for the fuel tank, so take a look at that. Comes in pretty nice and just goes down like that. Now we're going to go ahead and get the master cylinder mounted, and I'm going to start cleaning up the motor so that we can try and get that back in. If everything goes really well, we might start talking about putting that back in maybe tonight.
Thursday night, end of the night, we're all ready to go home, but we need to recap. What did we get done, Mr. Drake?
So tonight we took full advantage of having the engine out, so we took some time to clean the hard to get to spots. We ran some new silicone lines. We recessed some bracketry that we won't be able to get to later. We reconditioned the clutch slave cylinder. Just took care of some of the basic stuff that you just simply can't get to it when the engine's in the car. And then while we were doing this, Dakota and Cody were also working on the other end of the clutch system.
So the really trick valve cover assembly that we did, which is the Opel one that's been Frenched in and set on top of the other one, it looked awesome, and we had them in here together with the clear coat when we painted everything, but we didn't actually have something to fasten them together. This is going to become a priority as soon as we start trying to seal things up so we can do our first test fire. So we're working on what our mounting system is here. A little bit more on that later, but we got a solid plan, and we're going to end up using essentially the stock oil cap for the Opel as a hold down with a threaded rod through it so that we can actually use it to hold it to the Miata one. So it'll look trick, nobody will be able to figure out how we did it, and we've already got a bunch of responses on the internet as to what the hell this motor is supposed to be, because it says Opel, but it's got a Mazda logo. So kind of fun, but that's not the important part. That's just cosmetic. The most important thing is what we already got done with the clutch.
Speaking of what we're coming back to, we have the clutch master cylinder. Drake actually was the main driver of getting this clutch master cylinder in place. That is a Miata OE clutch master cylinder, and it's mounted straight to the firewall. On the inside, take a little gander. On the side of the clutch pedal itself, right there, we welded a bolt off the side of the actual pedal with a spacer that comes to a Heim. That Heim joint then has a push rod welded to the end of it, which acts as our rod to actually activate that clutch master cylinder. And we have full throw all the way in. We also have a spring off to the side so that it doesn't just jump itself out of that hole. A lot of that praise for all of that work comes down to this man here and this man here, the two master fabricators of the garage. So got a lot done.
Because we didn't have to do anything on that, because literally all we have to do is prime the oil, hit the key, and see if it starts. I think we're gonna try and crack that thing off tomorrow, but I wanna see this back in here real soon so that we can start doing some of that other mock-up and get things finalized. But it's already like 11, so we're gonna call it a night.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think we got
Firing order issue?
I'm starting to think. This is looking much better. Okay, let's go back that other way.
Don't like that.
I don't like that either.
Ready?
Yep. Go back more the other way. Okay. Are we sure we got the right firing order? Yeah. Let's go back to our geometry.
That was a fire.
No.
That is fucking awesome.
Right? I don't think I'm gonna mess with much over here. Maybe just a little bit more of this.
Watch your hands.
we did a thing. I mean, mostly he did a thing, and he did a thing, and I kind of helped a little, and he kind of helped a little bit, and he helped a little bit. So we all kind of did a thing, but it runs, it fires, it makes noise, and potential fireballs out that side. All good things. Look at this. It ran enough to completely blew out the stainless.
The first section.
The first section. Thoughts?
So we've gotten a lapsed runtime of 3 minutes so far. We're going to take a little bit of timing out to see if we can back off some of that bluing on the exhaust, because it seems like it's probably getting a little warmer than we want it to be. We got a couple of leaks that we're going to have to address later, but they're not going to stop us from doing break-in. So it looks like the rear main didn't seal entirely when we put the pan back on, because this is the pan off of a different model, so that would fit into the cross member of the truck. So we kind of expected that. That's the whole purpose of the run stand, is that we can do this outside of the truck where it's a less stressful situation to try and break it in. That way, if we do have to fix these things, we're not doing it in the chassis. That being said, it's still really stressful. The cam break-in process is basically 25 to 30 minutes at 2,000 RPM. We have a really good muffler that's quieting that down, so we're going to try and knock it out. It's starting to get late, so we're going to try and do that real fast so we can call it a day.
All right, giving you an update. We got round one out of the way. It was 3 minutes. We were just checking for some oil leaks and everything else, making sure everything was good after those 3 minutes of running time.
We checked and we definitely have them.
We have them. However, second run, everything was going really well. The peanut tank that we have on here was about 3/4 full. We got about 8 minutes out of that run. So
it's going to get mad fuel economy.
All things considered, so far, so good. We're going to keep going on this thing, make sure we get the full break in, the full 30 minutes. Again, that's what we're aiming for, is 30 minutes across the board. So, we'll see you in a minute.
So Drake and I came out this morning and worked through a couple of issues that were already plaguing us last night. We were having issues with this thing just getting crazy hot, and once we got it completely heat soaked, it was very difficult to get any of the heat out of it. Now, there's a couple reasons for that. One of the reasons is we were running pretty lean. We think one of our jets was actually clogged, and they were definitely the wrong size. So we went up in our jet sizes. That helped a ton. Then we went ahead and looked at the thermostat. We were going to take it out just to see if maybe that would help the situation, but it was actually stuck in the open position anyways. I had been sold a fail-safe style that once it opens all the way in an overheated condition, it locks forever. It permanently stays open. So we took that out and tossed it. We'll put in a better one later, but for now we were able to get the cooling system working much better, and it ran the rest of the cam break-in at a nice healthy temperature. So now it actually runs very well. We got our timing dialed in much better than it was last night. Our timing tape appears to have been reading strangely when we were dealing with it yesterday, but today it's magically better. So I think for now, that's going to be the end of this video. However, I'm going to fire it up one more time for good measure. I think that's it for the fuel. It'll be difficult to see, but that bad boy is bone dry. So it did just stall. However, what that tells us is that we have managed to burn, in the course of the 30 minutes of runtime that we've given it, 3 gallons. So at roughly a gallon every 10 minutes, you do the math, this thing's not going to get amazing fuel economy, but should make lots of torque. On that note, Wagadoo out.